I couldn't begin to stand here and pretend I know the entirety and the full reason, the complexities of how I ended up here and my struggle with same-sex attraction. But I do know this, and I can share this with you. When I was a kid, I struggled to connect. I struggled to relate to other kids. Each year I'd make friends, and each year I would lose friends, and that happened over and over again, in 6 years in a row. And by the time I hit 6th grade, it was a lot of pain, and I didn't know how to cope with it. It felt like someone was grabbing my heart, and I'd walk through the hallways at school, and I'd see the other guys, and there'd be this pitting in my hands, this ache, as I just wanted to be one of them. I wanted to be in on the jokes. I wanted to have friends like that. I wanted to be seen and known, and I knew I wasn't. And add an early exposure to pornography, and somewhere along the way, in 6th grade, I started developing same-sex attractions, watching the other guys in the locker room. And I didn't know what it was, what it meant. I didn't have language for that yet. But I'll never forget one day, my family was in the car, and my dad said, I can't even remember the context, but my dad said, if I ever found out any of you kids were gay, I'd kick you out of the house. And my heart just sank, and I thought, is that me? I'm gay? Is that what I am? Yeah, I must be. And I immediately thought, if they knew, they wouldn't love me, so no one can ever know. No one can ever know, and I'll keep this to be my secret. But I think there was a deeper lie that set into my heart that day, this thought that if anyone truly got to know me, if they wouldn't love me then that means that I'm unlovable, doesn't it? And that came to control the following years of my life. I grew up in the church, but what power does a gospel message have when you're sitting in the pews and you truly believe you cannot be loved? So I stepped away from the church, and it wasn't until college that I would step back. A campus ministry there really changed my life. Students showed me what the love of God can be, and it reignited my faith. I made friends. I found healings for so many things. I kept everyone at an arm's length away, and I never told them what I struggled with, because I knew if I told them that they would reject me. I believed that in my heart. And I even got the chance to serve and be a small group leader there and touch other people's lives, but I hit a plateau with God, where I kind of stopped growing, and I knew it. And it pained me to know that, why can't I grow anymore? Why do I feel so distant from God? And I was in prayer one day, and God really just showed me that I was still keeping him at arm's length away, because I really believed that if he came into this core center part of me, that he couldn't love me either. And he was inviting me into that, which scared the crap out of me. So I ran. Who wouldn't? First I thought, well, what if I'm not Christian? That's pretty easy, right? I could have a good life. But God had already done so much in my life, I couldn't imagine just stepping away. And then I thought, well, there are plenty of churches where this isn't a problem, and I can just go there. And I visited some, but I knew God was calling me into something terrifying and scary and painful, and I was just running away. And there were no answers for me there. So I gave God the meekest, most terrified and fearful yes that I ever have. And wow, he met me there. That night of prayer changed my life. It felt like I was opening a door in my heart, and as God came in, he simply embraced me and he said, "You are my beloved son." Now, I had heard this a million times. Who hasn't in the church heard, "You are loved"? But it never felt like this before. Because this wasn't God just coming in and telling me that he loves me. This was God coming in and looking straight at my heart. My envious, lustful, prideful, deceitful, hurtful, bleeding, broken heart. He looked right at that and he said, "This is the heart of my son." And I finally understood the parable of the two debtors, one who was forgiven a little, one who was forgiven a lot. I don't think we can truly understand the depth of God's love and of his grace when we don't see it from the perspective of our own brokenness and how much it means for him to love us in spite of all of that. And that began quite the journey as I set forward knowing that I wanted healing, but not knowing what healing was. I'm a nerd, so the first thing I did was I got books. Actually, Joe Dallas's book was the first one I read, and it gave me a lot of hope. And stepping out of that, I started to slowly tell my friends, and my friends gave me an incredible response. My friends showed me love and kindness, and they said, John, this doesn't change the way we see you. We still love you, and I'm so thankful for that. But at the same time, my friends didn't know how to handle things. They didn't know how to handle me. Because the church and everything had told them that it's this special and unique sin, and that I was fragile, and that so they just kind of kept their distance because they didn't want to say the wrong thing, crack the wrong joke, and hurt me. And I'd never felt more alone. So I was blessed to find Outpost and Joshua Fellowship, a community of guys that stood shoulder to shoulder with me in my decision to pursue after God. And I started to being there with leaders who had stories of hope and wisdom. I started to grow faster there than I could have imagined or ever could have grown alone. If you don't have community, find it. As these leaders came up, it's everywhere. As soon as I'm there, I'm asking, okay, so what is healing? What does healing look like? And, their answer was, well, it's prayer. And I'm like, oh, great, more prayer. Because I haven't been praying my entire life to just, God, take this away. And it never worked. So I'm like, it clearly does not work. Like, come on, what's the special sauce here? And it was prayer. But turns out I did not know what prayer was. They said, come in our summer course, they had us spend an hour, the first hour, just in the prayer room, just in the worship room. And I'm competitive, so they said hour, and I'm like, fine, I'll do 2. And it was exhaustive, it was tiring, it was boring, it was frustrating, because I realized I knew how to talk to God real well. I did not know how to listen. And I learned how to listen there. And the things he had to share with me, he began to speak truth into the lies that were so deeply seated in my heart. He began to heal old wounds. He brought forgiveness into relationships. He separated my identity from my brokenness and from my sexuality, and he instead gave me an identity as a son. And he began to speak into me how he made me. And that took time. None of this was easy. There were so many tears with friends and mentors and pastors along the way, but the funny thing about all this, at no point was it a conversation about take this thought captive and replace it with another one, or repurpose your attractions. It was, my desires changed, and I saw them start to change and continue to change, and but at this point it was almost like a consolation prize, because I found so much of God in all of this. I began to watch as I found my strength in God instead of in other men. I began to see other men as my brothers who struggled with the same things I did. I always thought I was unique and special and struggling with SSA. That made me some that guy at church. But the reality is I face the same passivity and struggles that any man in the church does. And the more I've been in Joshua Fellowship, the more I've seen that I am not that dissimilar from any other man. I've started to see the beauty and the difference and the distinction between women and myself, which says a lot when you come out of a history of narcissism, having all your needs met by other men or yourself. Through all this, I saw my attractions change, and that's what got me into the race, is I thought, well, that would be great, but what I found was encountering God, getting to know him so much more than I ever thought was possible. And I'd step through it all again. I've had family members call me demon-possessed. I've had others say I'm a monster in ministry for denying people's true selves. I'd step through it all again for the amount that I've gotten to know God in this process, without a shadow of a doubt. So my prayer for anyone here who struggles is that you'd have the courage to step into those hard and painful places in your heart, and the strength to be still and let God minister to you there. Thank you.